Hey everybody, welcome to episode number 3 of the Plugged In Radio podcast. Boy, if you made it this far, congratulations. I hope you're really enjoying it. It's been quite a ride so far. 2 episodes in the can. I'm learning as I go. A little bit of some audio issues in the first episode. We took care of that in episode number 2. Then in episode number 2, I found some video issues, which I've already solved here in episode 3. But as it were, our co-host today is John James Jacoby. He's already thrown a monkey wrench into the game plan by introducing 3 plugins when we normally only cover 1. But that's okay. We're going to get through it. This is the podcast for folks who want to learn about our favorite plugins from the authors and creators themselves. You can find out more, PluggedInRadio.com. And I don't even have the website ready yet. It's sort of being built right now. So once you get there, all of the links to the socials and to places that you can subscribe to Plugged In Radio. And of course, first and foremost, if you do enjoy the show, 5-star review would be grand. We'd love to get a 5-star review over in iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, Stitcher, wherever you're listening, in your Ford Sync, doesn't matter. Wherever you're listening to this would be great. And again, if you want that WordPress entrepreneurial talk, that's still happening over at mattreport.com. You can find out more about that if you head on over there. So without further ado, we've got this guy that I've known since the days of Providence. Providence, Rhode Island, that is, where I first met Jay Tripp, as he's known in the community, and amazing guy, amazing talent. He's the creator of Flocks.io and about 1 billion other plugins. I can't find that tab right now, but he's here to talk to us today about his 3 plugins and what's going on with his business. So if you don't know him, here he is. John, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Is there like a drum roll? Some kind of like a...
I'm actually researching soundboards right now.
A soundboard? Yeah. It's an important investment.
Yeah, it'll eventually be here.
So thanks for having me on.
Sure. No
sorry to muck up the entire process with 3 plugins instead of 1. They're pretty small. There's not actually a whole lot to go through with these 3. And the reason that I picked them and why I think they're my favorite is because I'm kind of digging on small plugins these days. I've spent a lot of my career building big, epic plugins, BuddyPress, BBPress, helping on Jetpack, and so I'm kind of vibing on having nice, small Unix-style plugins. And I will plug that, if it's allowed, that I'll be speaking on Unix-style plugins at LoopConf later in the year. So that probably ends up online somewhere for everyone to watch. So if you want to hear more or learn more about tiny plugins and how they all get bolted together to integrate with each other, that is where my mind is at lately. So that's why there's 3. Sorry.
That's awesome. Let's expand upon that a little bit. For folks who are, we'd like to identify who these plugins are for, not just for the end user, but who's implementing them. Sometimes people who are implementing these plugins, the use case is you need an implementer or you need a developer to do it, but the end user ultimately becomes, Joe or Jane user. Who are your plugins specifically for? Not the epic large ones, but sort of these smaller concentrated ones that you're working on.
So the smaller ones, there's probably about 30 of them now, but we're going to talk about 3, I think, today. And they are largely incremental improvements to either WordPress's admin area or the dashboard interface, or they introduce a small amount of functionality to replace existing pieces of WordPress's admin area that I have sort of personally found challenging or in need of improvement. And so 2 of those 3 are like that. The other one is an events plugin, and there is probably 50 different event calendar plugins, and many of them are spectacular. So thinking about trying to have, or my spin on an events calendar plugin was partially just a challenge for myself. Also came out of some client work, and then was able to dig deep into some of the fun APIs underneath WordPress that I haven't gotten to touch and play around with in a while. So it would kind of scratched a lot of itches for me at the same time. And so I thought they'd be fun to talk about today.
Yeah, and I want to talk about, I want to jump into the event calendar a little bit later after the first two plugins. I have a lot of questions about why you chose that and who that's for.
Sure.
But episode number 1, Tom McFarland came on and we talked about easier excerpts. And, you install the plugin, there's no options. It just works. Sort of where you're aiming for, right? With these smaller sort of, it makes your word pressing a little bit better when you enable these things, and they don't get in the way, which are plugins and solutions that I love, right? As somebody who's in it from day to day, or to day to day. Let's dive into the GoToMeeting share. Let me just move over to scene number 2.
All right.
So you have control there. Why don't you take us through your first plugin?
So the first one is it's called WP Chosen, and Chosen is a JavaScript library that is an open source piece of software that has really nothing to do with WordPress. But since WordPress comes with jQuery, and because drop-down lists can sometimes be a little bit, I would say, I don't know. They don't look the same in every browser. They don't look like WordPress. They end up looking like Windows or OS 10 or whatever you're looking at. And on the long list boxes, they end up being a little bit unruly, where you just don't have a lot of control over, a list like the time zone that might end up having 50 or 80 or 100 different entries in it. So what WP Chosen does as a plugin is within the admin area, within WP admin, it targets some specific select boxes or drop-downs, and it makes them look like WordPress's text boxes or like WordPress's UI would look like the element library would look like the pattern library would look like, and makes the drop-downs in WordPress look like WordPress. So they have the nice border like a text area would have. They use the dash icons down arrow so that it looks like WordPress's UI. And then for something like the time zone, you can have a searchable list box to try and narrow down the results of a time zone, which could sometimes take forever to find because they're ordered by the PHP order, and sometimes that doesn't really feel right or make sense. So if you can drop something down and start searching for something in it, just makes the experience a little bit just that much nicer and easier. And so I think the goal here, and this with BuddyPress and BBPress, we always talked about how it was forums made the WordPress way, or communities done the WordPress way, and that sort of mantra carries into these plugins where you want to turn them on and then kind of forget that they're there. They are supposed to blend into WordPress as transparently and invisibly as they can, and just provide that crisp, that one click better experience than what you get out of WordPress out of the box.
Sure.
So the time zone and the settings screens are usually the first place where something like this becomes the most apparent. But then we also start targeting other places like bulk actions or categories, where you might have a lot of categories on your site and you want to filter by one of them, but you're not going to scroll through a list of 1,000 categories. It's just easier to type something and get some results out of it. So we target many of the selects and drop-downs that are here, that we know are going to be here all the time. And then we have some targeting that's fairly loose, that's going to try and fill into other select areas that are common amongst the ecosystem of WordPress's 50,000 other plugins. So for the most part,
sounds like an easy task.
Yeah, right. It's it's a no-brainer, real simple. But it shouldn't. The only thing with a plugin like this is that Chosen is a relatively popular JavaScript library. So there are other plugins like Easy Digital Downloads and WooCommerce, and even the Make theme from the folks at the Theme Foundry. They include Chosen as a JavaScript library. So this plugin tries to play nice with those plugins and themes too. So even though this is a simple looking plugin that is one click on and it does what it needs to do, underneath it all, to make it look and feel right for users, there's a lot of little nuance to it and a lot of little work that needs to go into making these things work right. So it's a small plugin, but uniquely powerful, looks and feels like WordPress, and should, I mean, I wouldn't say that it's one of my more popular plugins, but it's like one of my little favorites that is easy to add to your site or a client site or a site that you're building for somebody, to give them this extra little ability that people come to expect from the web. I think that WordPress doesn't have packaged with it yet. So
Yeah, that's great. I have some follow-up questions, but let's take a look at the second minimalist plugin here that you have.
my second one here actually replaces all of the your profile section of WordPress. Now, for anyone that maybe isn't as fluent or familiar, when you click on users and go to your profile, you get you get a river of a profile. You get a top-down list of your username, your email address, your password, your avatar, all these things in just one big long thing. And that worked for WordPress for a really long time because the needs of a user were pretty simple, and a plugin like BuddyPress could come in and really flip that sideways and make a theme side profile, customizable fields, uploads for avatars, all this other stuff. But as WordPress has aged and as we've put more and more options into a user profile, I think the need to separate out a profile into sections has become a lot more necessary. So you activate the WP User Profiles plugin, and what you get is it replaces the Your Profile link entirely with a tabulated profile that uses WordPress's meta boxes so that you can show and hide them. You've got screen options that roll open so you can show and hide them from here. Some help tabs to try and help somebody navigate their profile. And then these tabs they try to stick close to WordPress's verbiage and nomenclature for using profile account options permissions. And then, as you can maybe see, the WP chosen plugin already knows to look for this select box and anything that's in the user profiles area and target it and highlight it and make it look all pretty. So this is a quick and easy way to take what is otherwise a pretty, I don't want to say not necessarily confusing, but it's intimidating to see 30 different options in one screen and have to save them or update them, and this just separates that out and gives them a little bit more like a purpose and a place for these things to live. And then this plugin is designed and coded in such a way that it will do two things. One, it's going to try and fit into any modifications that any other plugins are going to try to do to the built-in WordPress profile screen, which is pretty hard to try and guess because it's always going to be something different. And then for developers that care to support this plugin, there are enough actions and filters and things for someone to add in their own tab or register their meta boxes to a specific tab or add them in a specific order or add them to the left or the right or anything else. So for the developers that are interested in integrating with this plugin, it is intended to be played with and extended. So this for me is a way to implement some of the vision that we've had for what a BuddyPress admin area profile might look like, or for what WordPress core's admin area could also maybe look like at some point. But to be honest, some of this isn't necessarily ready for WordPress core yet. Like, there are a lot of other open source projects or things that you use on the internet, like GitLab or GitHub, or you log into your Facebook account or wherever you go, where your profile can be simple. It might just be a first name, last name, email address, password. But as it grows and as you need more in here, it becomes pretty clear that it's time to separate some of this out. So
yeah, I was going to say
WordPress-
it's definitely much more of a, it's not native isn't the word I'm looking for, but traditional. When you go to a majority of any other, like you were mentioning, Facebook, your bank account, any site that you normally log in and have a profile for, instinctively, I want to see these tabs, right? I mean, and any SaaS program that I'm subscribed to is structured like this.
Yep.
And just over the years of compiling WordPress user options, like you said before, you just get this river of information, and a lot of us forget. And I talked about this with Tom in episode 1. We were in it every single day, so sometimes we're like, hey, this river of, you don't even notice it, right? You're like, oh yeah, user profile page. I go here, I scroll down, I change my password, done.
Yep.
But like 99% of these users aren't living in it. And it's when they go to change their password and they log into, WordPress for the one time that they log into it per year. And they're like,
Yep,
where's the password again? Like, what are all these options, right? And they're looking for it.
Yep.
When you're in it every day, it's so easy. But when you're not, it becomes a bit of a challenge. One thing I wanted to bring up about both of these types of plugins that are, very minimalist and they solve these problems. If you're a beginner to WordPress, like if you're listening to this right now, you might be a beginner to WordPress, and you might be trying to maybe even start a business or do some light consulting on the side, or maybe you just actually have some concern about running WordPress the quote unquote right way. A lot of the advice that we read, and that a lot of us are guilty of saying in the past, is you don't want to install too many plugins. Too many plugins is bad. Your site should have less than 23 plugins for optimal performance.
Right.
You and I both understand that it's not the amount of plugins that you have, but the actual quality of code.
Sure.
Just looking at how you're organizing these plugins or these screens, I mean, I feel like it's also something that we'd probably eventually see in the plugin page too, right? Or just
Right.
where you're not even worried about the plugin count anymore. Like it's just like this.
For sure.
You just add it and it works, and there's no concern.
Right.
I mean, I don't know. Maybe that was maybe just a vomit of a thought. But
so it's there. It's not like there isn't truth to the statement, right?
Right.
Like if you go in installing tons of plugins willy nilly and you don't know what they do, you are going to have a problem, right? It's like if you adopt too many cats, you're going to have a problem.
Right.
But there is a certain point where you can have 10 cats as long as they're mice, they're chasing mice and they're doing what they're supposed to do. Then you have 10 cats because they're doing what they're supposed to do. That's fine. I lived in the country when I was a kid. We had a bunch of cats, and you know why? Because they caught mice and rats, and it was great to have those cats around. But it is possible to have too many. It's just more important that they are doing what you need for them to do. That they are that you're using the right tool for the right job and the right purpose. So, in a previous life, working at Automatic on WordPress.com, imagine, if you will, the biggest WordPress multi-site installation in the world probably has 150 plugins active on it, and that's only their architecture for these plugins is far beyond just clicking activate on a plugin or dropping something in the MU plugins folder. There are explicit directories full of plugins that only load in WP admin and only load theme side and only load for the API and only do certain things. And these are plugins. This is code that is running inside of WordPress. So the advice to not run too many of them, I think the missing context to that statement is not to install plugins that do the same thing. Don't install 5 SEO plugins. Don't install 5 caching plugins or a bunch of Twitter, Facebook, sidebar, share link plugin things. Like, find the one that is the one that does what you need for it to do, and then try and eliminate the others. The overlap there isn't doing you any good. Get rid of that. I think that's the missing part of that statement.
Sure. The writing a post, and it should be available by the time that this episode airs to the public. It's how to select the right WordPress plugin, and I use this acronym called FUSE. Plugin, Fuse, that kind of thing. And the F in FUSE stands for fit, and it's fit in terms of, does it fit the project that I'm working on, and does it fit with all the other plugins that I have installed?
Right.
And that's for sure, because as you and I have both seen in consulting days and working with clients and just general WordPress support, you see somebody installing, like you said, 5 SEO plugins to do the same job when they just missed the options in the other plugins, that kind of thing. The E in Fuse, though, stands for the ecosystem, and it's how well does your plugin play with other people's plugins, but more importantly, the ecosystem of the author or the creator of the plugin that you're using. So my question to you is, for Phlox and for JTrip, how does one build, or what is your vision for building an ecosystem of plugins like this, if you're even thinking about that? And how do you deliver that? How do you deliver these little micro plugins to somebody without saying, install these 50 plugins?
Right. So this is a tough question, actually. This is a question that is frequently asked, and that the common criticism is that WordPress.org's plugin repository doesn't always do a great job of revealing the plugins that may play nice with each other, or that might be sort of intended for each other. And so my solution to this problem is a little self-serving and a little selfish, but it is the quickest way for me to try and solve this problem, was to build these plugins intentionally to have some support for each other. And having built plugins for a really long time, I call these like sub actions, not to be too technical, but all of these plugins hook into WordPress the WordPress way, and then they all have their own actions and hooks in them to let other plugins hook into them. So it is easy when you speak the code to introduce the execution points where the code needs to talk.
Right.
But on the user side of it, on the discovery side of it, on the how do I know that these plugins play nice with each other side, I essentially made a user on WordPress.org and named the collection of these plugins Stutter with 3 T's in the middle. One, because, when we're all learning to talk in front of people, we all are nervous and stutter. And so, when I was doing that as a teenager, I had my fair share of spitting and sputtering and yammering and going on for too long. And 2, I think the name, maybe the deeper meaning to it is that we all are trying to figure out how these things work and where we fit and where plugins fit and how they're going to communicate with one another. And a lot of the times when you're doing that, you're going to embarrass yourself. You're going to feel insecure. You're going to be in a place that is uncomfortable. And so this group of plugins, one is meant to improve someone's experience with WordPress. 2, ideally, improves the way that you communicate with the app, with WordPress, the way that you communicate with WP Admin. And 3, I needed a way to collect these plugins and group them together. And a dedicated user on WordPress.org was the easiest way to do that. I already had my own library of plugins that don't really fit into this group, but this group does fit together. And there are about 20 of them, I think, that are online now, and there's probably another 20 that are unfinished. They're in the vault, so they'll get released, or they'll in some way. But the discovery is hard, especially on WordPress.org, because it's largely about the person. It's the credibility of the author. It's no different than reading a book or watching a podcast or listening to a podcast or or choosing what kind of car that you buy or whatever. It is based on the reputation of that person or that brand. And the WordPress.org and the plugins repo is not any different. You find the author, you find someone who does the kind of work that you enjoy, and then you continue to enjoy the work that they put out. Pippin Williamson, Scott Riley, there's a bunch, Boone, Mark Jakewood, there's a bunch of prolific plugin developers that you can trust what they put out because you know that it's going to be good. And I've invested pretty heavily in my career to hopefully have a small fan club of people that enjoy what it is that I put out every once in a while. So.
I'm pretty sure you do. The S in Fuse, as you start to sort of hit upon it, stands for support, and it's the support that one will get from the author or the company, and it's also to make a distinction to the person who might be looking at a plugin and saying, hey, this is free. I'm going to use it. And then when it breaks, I'm going to go attack the author. I'm going to give them 1 star. And to try to make the distinction is if the plugin has a premium offering or, even a donation link, and you use this plugin for commercial purposes, as to say that the website that you run it on makes money for you, think about, handing over a few bucks. We'll answer this question now, and then I want to dive into the larger plugin that you have here. But your thoughts on supporting all these? If you have all these micro plugins, how do you keep your brain cells straight to support the many different channels that you have to be in?
Right. So I do most of the support. I try and use WordPress.org's free support forums as much as I can, because that is going to be the entry point where most people are going to discover and download any of the plugins that I'm gonna release. For BuddyPress and BBPress, they both have their own forums. We are very lucky to have the contributors that we have on those projects, where there are several moderators in those forums helping everyone, because they have hundreds of thousands of active installs. Most of these plugins, these 3, have dozens of installs. I mean, they're not really a support burden, but when you have lots of plugins, it is easy to feel encumbered by the amount of people that are using them and the support requests that come in. The ironic part about your question is that I am currently learning how to monetize plugins. That is honestly not an avenue that I have thought about that deeply. I mean, I've considered it, but it is only really recently that I think our community is starting to feel the pressure of free support and it being burdensome and getting burnt out by providing that free support. And I guess I've been building software, and I've worked in customer service jobs, and when I was a wee little pup, so I'm used to the people's expectations and how they feel, and how that's just part of the relationship that you're going to have with users, and even if they're not customers, just a user. If something breaks and it's your fault, that's you have a responsibility to fix that. I mean, it's, even if it's free, it's you. If I break it, I feel a sense of ownership to try and repair that. The part where I've thought about monetizing plugins and what it means to sell, if it's the code itself, if it's a support contract, it's harder to sell support for plugins that are big like BuddyPress or BBPress, because there is an enormous amount of undertaking that could go into supporting something that is as huge as a community forum or an online community or social network. The smaller plugins, I think, are a little bit easier because you can sell them very App Store style for 99 cents or a couple of bucks, and someone gets what they expect out of it and then moves on. For the most part, these plugins are pretty small, where the only breakage usually comes from a plugin conflict, and those are easy enough to hone in on, where you can say, these 2 things are active, I can find what's wrong, and we can fix it. But the idea of selling plugins is captivating to me because it is kind of an untapped market. I know we have sort of a limited time schedule, and I've got one more plugin to review. But the quick thought, and I'm playing with the idea of selling plugins, but in a different kind of way. It's one thing to be a plugin store. There are many good examples of this. Easy Digital Downloads, WooCommerce, the folks at Modern Tribe that have the event calendar where you have an add-on model where you can sell. Even the Web Dev Studios folks are starting to do this with Plugin Eyes. You have an online store, you sell plugins, you sell support, you go. What we don't have in the WordPress ecosystem that I would like to try and solve is to bring a more traditional authorship model into WordPress plugins. Think of a company like O'Reilly, where they have authors that write books. They have editors that need to editorialize those books, technical writers that are going to go through and critique those books, people that are specifically into the grammatical part of it that are going to go through an entire book and scrutinize it, and O'Reilly is going to package it up and help sell and ship and distribute that book. So a distribution house with code review, with a Lisa Sabin Wilson is working on her 10th version of WordPress for Dummies. That is 10.0 of WordPress for Dummies. So there is no reason why you can't apply that same model to a bevy of WordPress plugins. Authors that are just starting, professional authors, full-time authors, designers. Someone's got to design the cover of a book. Someone needs to design the header image for a plugin. These things translate very clearly to one another. And I'd like to try and solve that problem for the WordPress ecosystem. So the website for that is pluginsloaded.com, but it's pretty vacant right now because it's mostly just me trying to fill it full of plugins and content. But I hopefully, if we talk in a year or two, there's some momentum behind that idea because I think it is a space that will hopefully only benefit WordPress users that are kind of looking to solve this fuse problem that you're looking towards. If we can take a isolated group of plugins, we can vet them, give them a stamp of approval. We can give them a place for priority support. We can get people invested in spending a couple of dollars for the code that's here, and then have a shop, have someone that can help elevate plugins to a better, I don't know, just a better experience, a better fit into WordPress, and produce better results. Then that's what I would really largely like to try and help everybody with. So.
Well, speaking of being a masochist and wanting to get to get into selling plugins, if my story is telling it all, I started a product shop too, and now I'm just starting a radio show about it. So, just trying to dig into the opportunity of plugins that exists. No, this is awesome stuff. I'm glad you're here to share it. And those of you who are just listening to the podcast, of course, I wish you do come and take a check on the video as well, because number one, you get to follow along and see our authors use their plugins, and number two, I've pulled up pluginsloaded.com on the screen, just having that up there so you can see it as we move along. Great stuff. I'm with you 1000% on all of that stuff. Let's dive into the event calendar plugin.
Yeah.
Again, talk about making a super leap. You are just not, you will just not back down from the fight. I didn't even know, to be honest, I mean, we're friends and we're in each other's social streams all the time. I didn't even know you launched this back in September. And it was last updated about 8 hours ago. So good on you. Tell us, I mean, in the face of all this and, wanting to get into the premium market and sort of, start getting into that, event calendars are like page builders, and I can
Sure.
tell you a story about page builders.
You can.
Yeah. So I'm going to give the screen over to you again. Take us through the demo of this and show us how your event plugin is slightly different.
All right. So the motivation behind building an event calendar plugin, very similar to most other plugins that get built, comes from looking at what's out there and thinking that you can do something different. You can add your own voice, your own twist to an old thing. I've been listening to a lot of music again, which is something that I somehow lost in my life. And I used to be really big into all kinds of music, DJing, production, and I grew up in a roller rink, so music was in my soul at a very early age. And musically always was fascinated by samples and hearing people sample lyrics, hearing people mention other songs in their own lyrics, finding the little nuances or the same instruments or the samples that get used across songs and genres and artists. And if you start to pay attention, they start to tell an interesting story. Recently, I mean, since Prince passed away, you start listening to some old Prince music, and you start to realize that there are many people that have covered his songs. He covered the Foo Fighters in the Super Bowl. Who is the only person alive that might be able to do better than the Foo Fighters? It would have to be Prince.
Right.
Like when you look at the way that things get done and redone and reinvented, my motivation behind an event plugin wasn't really to compete with the big major players that there are, because there are enormously popular 1 million installs event calendar plugins that are out there that are more mature. They have a larger ecosystem. They have more features. They have more of everything. And I think that was what motivated me to try and do my own, was to eliminate them more, was to break down events in WordPress really to their simplest possible form, using a modern take on WordPress's built-in meta queries and just implementing it in a way that felt like WordPress and didn't come with any of the additional complications that calendars come with, CalDAV, iCal, exports. These are things that could be built as third-party plugins on top of this plugin. But what is truly the simplest way to implement events in WordPress? So that's what this is. If you care to try it out, it is called WP Event Calendar. That does not help you really find this plugin because they are almost all called some variation of Events Calendar, Event Calendar Pro, WP Events Calendar, WP Events, WP Calendars. They're all the same thing. Mine is WP Event Calendar. It's probably got 40 people that are using it. I mean, there is not a huge audience for this, but events show up as a top-level menu. They are a custom post type in WordPress, so they work the same way that posts do. When you click Add New to add an event, you get this fancy-looking interface that looks a lot like what WordPress's posts and pages screen looks like, but you get an additional meta box for start dates, end dates, and some of the basic things that you expect out of an event. It uses jQuery's calendar, except we stylize the heck out of it to look like WordPress. So if you change your color scheme to red or ectoplasm or any of the other ones that are there, you're going to get the same look and feel to this calendar, so it looks as much like WordPress as possible. All-day events, start and end dates to events. And so this is just a custom post type to get events in the system. So we will do example event. And of course, I'm going to type it wrong 1,000 times because live demos are awesome. And
Pressures of live radio.
Right. And you can see that WP Chosen shows up here in our select box. Woo. So we make an event, we hit publish, now we have an event. Big deal. So it shows up in your list table. So you've got a start time and an end time, which you can sort by. It gives you the duration. It tells you whether or not it repeats, and then how it's categorized or tagged. But the power and the fun, really, of building this plugin was in the actual calendar view itself. So since most of these other calendar plugins have come into play, WordPress has introduced a base class for drawing tables in the admin area. And so this plugin uses WordPress's list table class to draw the columns and rows. And then we loop through all of the events in whatever the view is, and we show them in a nice way with WordPress's pointer API for popping up and viewing events. So the neat thing about this is that this is native WordPress. This is post types, built-in API, nothing fancy, and then using the UI that comes with WordPress to make a table that looks and feels exactly like WordPress. We've got 3 views. We've got the month view, a week view, so we can see all of our all-day events here. We can paginate through weeks at a time, and then we've got a day view, so we can see the events that are going on and whatever the days are we're at. So the neat thing about it is that it is baked into WordPress. Really, this is the WordPress way that I can imagine of doing events. Underneath the hood, it uses a bunch of really it is ready and listening for a bunch of WordPress's inner APIs where with one line of code, you can add a calendar to posts or pages or any other custom post type. You just add support for events, and suddenly you get a calendar, and the meta box is going to show up and work no problem. We've got all of our integrated help tabs with a neat glossary of what the icons are, and it is really a fully featured integrated calendar solution for just logging events in WordPress. What it doesn't do, out of the box anyways, at least currently, is it's not for, it doesn't do like registration or membership signups or RSVPs to events or alerts or notifications or emails or any of these things that, one, I think most people expect from an event calendar plugin, but two, also bog down what a calendar of events just starts off as. Google or what, I think, right? Google or Microsoft. Microsoft just recently killed the calendar app, right? Was it Sunrise?
Yeah, they're sunsetting that
Yeah, right.
in August.
So they're major players that are all building huge apps and initiatives on top of a calendar protocol that has been around for 30 years. Also, they still don't like doing it, right? Like solving these problems is hard, is difficult to solve these problems in a way that is agreeable to users. And even when people like it, like lots of people liked Sunrise, but then they're going to put a bullet in it anyways.
Sure.
Like there are lots of reasons to try and reinvent some of these wheels. Some of them are just to experiment. Some of them are personal because you want to try and solve a problem your own way. And other times it's just to see what is in the space. And so the WP Event Calendar plugin, again, was kind of all of those things for me. It was I needed a solution for some client work. And none of the solutions that were out there were built in such a way that it allowed me to use those for them.
Sure.
Too many setting screens, too many options, too many things that needed to be set and tweaked, and it wasn't WordPressy enough. It didn't look and feel the way that it didn't look native. It didn't feel native to WordPress.
Yeah.
It always is some extra styling, some additional stuff. And for this client, it feeling native was paramount.
Sure.
And so that's the motivation for this one. And so hopefully, if y'all are listening and you're looking for a simple event calendar solution with potentially more little add-ons to come, give it a try. Check it out. Let me know what you think.
How does one output the calendar to the front end, or does it not?
That is a good question. So currently, it won't.
Okay.
There is nothing to support it. There is a plugin, one of those pending plugins of mine that is unreleased that will eventually make itself out into the wild. The problem with doing this, and all of these plugins, something like user profiles, for example, and this is a struggle that we've been dealing with WordPress for a very long time, is a plugin that needs to integrate with a theme. And even though that doesn't sound very difficult, it is unbelievably complex and challenging to try and write one set of interface rules to rule them all. And in order to do this properly, I think properly is maybe not the right word, but you know what I mean. We need a common set of interface elements that we can rely on. Most commonly, we are used to Twitter Bootstrap or Semantic UI or some other set of interface elements that we can rely on inside of a theme. And so anything that these plugins do that ends up being theme side that I'm planning on releasing are going to rely on some kind of front end framework to tie them all together, because it is just too much work to build support for all of the possible WordPress themes that are out there without being able to reset some front end styling. There's some like we learned this with BuddyPress and BBPress. I don't want to say the hard way, but we learned it the only way that we could, by developing a very primitive set of UI elements that we could style very blandly, that would provide a okay enough experience for everybody's BBPress and BuddyPress installations. And that, I will call that a win, but I don't know that it makes people happy, because it's not as finely tuned and polished as I think people expect for these kinds of tools to be. And so there is a plugin in queue to have a front end calendar and single page events with some actions and hooks and filters to let other plugins bolt into them. They are coming at some point, TBD. But yeah, it's just an incredibly large and huge undertaking.
For sure. I mean, amazing stuff. You have more plugins than I have podcasts, or we have the same amount of podcasts as we have plugins, and I just don't know how you do it all. 47 registered plugins in the repo just under your name, so it's pretty amazing stuff. And I think you're doing a great job in terms of trying to make that connection, and I can already see it from the business and marketing side. Like you mentioned before, somebody needs to focus on just the cover art of a plugin, and I can already see you tying in sort of the branding of all your plugins, which is like a huge deal, right? Like it seems so, whatever, just throw whatever up there, and who needs an icon? And like we saw with Instagram, people go absolutely nutty when an icon changes. But the point is I see you blending this together and building that brand, and good on you for doing that, for sure.
Thanks. It's hard. It's a lot of work. All the branding and the marketing stuff as a primarily developer. I think when I was learning how to code, I went back and forth between, am I a developer? Am I a designer? Am I an architect? What am I really? How do I fit? What am I going to do? And it turns out that I'm probably a better developer, but I am an acceptable designer. I am a passable designer.
Passable.
I can design something that is palatable. It's like French fries. It's like I can make a good sandwich is about what it is. So I tie it all together.
I had those same the same struggles. Like, hey, man, I'm a product guy, and then you start like asking for all these features in my lead dev Scott, and he's just like, that's not doable. I don't have enough time for that. And I was like, all right, well, fine, I'll move on to the next thing. John, thanks for taking the time today and showing us just a fraction of the cachet of plugins that you have. Where can folks find you on the web to say thanks and take a look at your products?
Yeah, if you want to find out more about me, I blog mostly rants about the internet and pictures of my dog at jaco.by. You follow me on Twitter at JJJ. And my company, where we do some WordPress hosting and largely consulting and some plugin development, code review, all the things, is Flox, FLOX.io. And then the plugins loaded thing, if I can make that work. There's always that too.
Do you have a short-term goal that you're trying to hit?
For plugins loaded?
Yeah.
Kinda, but it's the hardest part of it. It is building relationships with plugin developers to convince them that this is a place to think about hosting their software. So the short-term goal is to start knocking on some doors and seeing who wants to try and buddy up and join in and get some momentum behind it.
Nice. Well, we'll definitely obviously link that up in the show notes, and I definitely will help you get that message out for sure.
You're so sweet. You were a good friend.
Everybody else, it's PluggedInRadio.com. Head on over to PluggedInRadio.com. Again, page isn't there right now, but it will be by the time you listen to this, and you can be sure to subscribe to everything there, and 5-star review in iTunes if you like it. You don't have to even type anything out. You just hover over 5 stars, click that, and then hit submit. And that would be great. Helps us get found, especially in the early days. If you have a plugin or an author or a company, or you are a plugin author or a company and you want to reach out, it's PluggedInRadio.com/contact. We'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody.